Well, I like seafood, especially tuna, but I hesitate to buy it lately. It's rather expensive. And I heard that prices of grains such as soybeans and corn and sugar in futures market have increased. What's the reason of rise in the food prices?
Yeah, well, it's like a lot of things nowadays. It's all to do with globalization, for one thing, and the other aspect is the environment. And as for tuna fish, of course, there's an enormous rise in demand because it seems that the Chinese have suddenly acquired a taste for tuna fish, and they are importing tuna, eating tuna in a big way. And of course, there are a lot of Chinese people around, so that is leading to enormous price hikes. And of course, on the supply side, there are problems also because of extreme overfishing, which is starting to limit the supply of tuna fish that's available in the markets. And that is leading to environmental concerns on the part of tuna fishing countries, and they are trying to restrict the amount of tuna fish fishing that is allowable. So there's problems on the supply side and the demand side as well. And for grain, this is actually quite an interesting thing because, again, suddenly there's an enormous amount of interest in biofuels, alternative fuels, non-fossil fuels. And, of course, grain of all kinds actually are a really very important source of biofuels. So everybody is trying to get hold of all the corn that's available, all the sugar canes, and all kinds of resources in that particular area. And therefore, prices are going up. And this is actually becoming a huge problem, for instance, for pig farmers, because the price of corn is going up enormously, and they're unable to pay for the for corn that's obviously needed to maintain a good pig farming industry. So all sorts of repercussions are growing out of this particular situation, and it is in a sense a little bit of irony involved here, because everybody is actually trying to conserve energy, as a result of which energy resources are getting scarce, everybody being more interested in environmentally friendly fuels, i.e. biofuels, and therefore there's a surge of demand, and that is actually leading to enormous demand, higher prices, and resources, of course, running out. So you might say that this is a bit of a fallacy of composition, if you like, a situation in which people are trying to do something good for the environment, as a result of which we are all suffering from negative effects on the environment and indeed in prices.
So it's a very complicated situation.
It is very complicated, and it is an equation which is very difficult to resolve because, I mean, people are trying to behave in logical and acceptable ways, as a result of which the situation is getting out of hand and unacceptable. So this, I think, is very much the strange and rather frightening thing about globalization, that the more people pursue something which they perceive as being good for themselves, everybody ends up, as a result, harming each other in terms of prices, in terms of market environment, in terms of, indeed, the hard environment altogether.
Besides food, the cost of steel, non-ferrous metals such as copper, and wood have risen sharply as well, which are essential materials in various industries. Why?
Well, here again, complex factors at work here, but I think predominantly in this instance, it is the rise of China, foremost. So again, China starts to enter the picture, and not only China, but the other emerging economies, which are commonly known nowadays as the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. All these people are starting to really, if you like, take off as maturing, very rapidly growing, strong economies. And the more they enter into that stage of real takeoff, if you like to put it that way, they need to build the economic infrastructure, they need to have more buildings around, they need to build factories, they need to build roads, and all of these things lead to demand for very raw materials, basic materials, primary commodities. And that huge lift-off, if you like, of these economies is actually leading to these price distortions. So again, a complex fallacy of composition situation here, if you like, because obviously the emergence of these economies is good for the whole economy, the global economy, in terms of larger markets, in terms of greater markets for a huge host of industries, and that is obviously good in terms of economic growth. But the more all these people come onto the market, again, the more disruptions in the market, and of course, people who are unable to pay the high prices that these economies are able to pay will be chased out of the market, and they will suffer as a result. So again, it is a complex situation, and of course one which is very difficult to resolve, because you cannot tell these countries such as Brazil and China not to grow. I mean, everybody wants a share of that growing market, so nobody has any business telling them not to grow. But the more they grow, the more they disrupt the market.
And what made an impact on us is that Japan's currency, which had strong buying power, is losing its value. So what does it mean?
Well, there are a variety of reasons why the yen is losing value. In terms of the foreign exchange market, the primary reason at this particular moment is, of course, that Japanese interest rates are too low. But leaving that particular factor aside, I think in the context of what we are discussing at this particular moment, the thing is that actually Japan is becoming such a mature economy. It is a very sophisticated economy, but it is a maturing economy. It is an aging economy. And the amount of demand that sort of oozes out of Japan, if you like, is actually quite limited as compared to the huge amounts of demand that actually sort of flows out of young economies such as China and India. So obviously suppliers of raw materials, foodstuffs, all those other things that we have been discussing are more interested in capturing a certain proportion of a growing market as opposed to a maturing market. The Japanese market is a very sophisticated, high-quality market, but it's not a very big market compared to the markets of the BRICS and all these other emerging markets. So obviously the suppliers are more interested in capturing a portion of a growing market as opposed to a maturing market. So Japan remains a good customer, but compared to the younger ones, we are not able to provide the demand that people are that much interested in. And of course, Japan has been suffering a long time from deflation, and a lot of businesses are unable to cope with the rising prices of crude oil and the foodstuffs that we have been discussing. And so we are unable to pay the kind of prices that the Chinese are perfectly willing to pay, because there's a huge customer base there, and they cannot get hold of enough tuna, and they will pay anything. But the Japanese people are growing older. Maybe they don't want to eat too much fatty tuna, and so the demand structure is changing. And the newcomers on the block look a lot more starrier than the Japanese, if you like.
Right. So the flow of products has been changing under the globalization.
Yes, I think that's a huge, huge change in the way the world economy goes round. At one point, it was Japanese money, Japan money, and Japanese demand which made the global world go round. But now it is indeed the BRICS who are making the world go round. And of course, gone are the days when Japan was in a very comfortable position, producing and exporting a lot of cars, and in the meantime importing a lot of foodstuffs and crude oil. That was in fact a very simple picture of complementary trade, if you like. But the situation now that we are in a global market is much more complex than that. Everybody seems to be exporting the same things and importing the same things. So we have to recreate a situation in which, if you like, a new structure of complementary trade can be restructured. And Japan has to find its place in such a world, and think about not exporting so much cars, but maybe exporting environmental friendly technology to the Chinese, for instance, and providing the human resources that are necessary, so forth. So a new division of labor, I think, is something which we need to be looking at this particular moment to make the global world go round in a sensible way. Because we don't do that, otherwise the global world may actually stop going around because everybody is chasing after something which they perceive as being good for themselves, as a result of which they are mutually disrupting each other. So, in a sense, I suppose, if we play our cards wrong, this may turn into a situation of mutually assured economic destruction for everybody. So how we can find ways in which we can be compassionate to each other in trade, in capital flows, I think that is probably the key word, compassion. It will be, at the end of the day, compassion which makes the global world go round.
As you said, under the globalization, soaring food, resource, and energy costs are not only the problem in Japan, but also the world as a whole. So finally, Professor Hama, what would be the point for the international community to share sustainable affluence?
Yeah, this is a very difficult question indeed. But again, I think the key word here is compassion. I mean, I think we know in Japan that, in fact, there is a saying in Japan that if you're kind to others, others will be kind back to you. So I think this is a point in time when, indeed, the whole of the global economic community needs to sit back and think. Not so much about gain, but not so much gain to themselves, but gain to others, really. So a different, I suppose, dynamic needs to enter into the global market. That the meaning of global forces, if you like, will probably have to be reassessed, and that we really need to create a global version of the compassionate society. And then, as a result of which, we can be happy all together. But otherwise, again, it is mutually assured destruction. So it is quite a frightening world that we're living in at this moment, I think.
Professor Hama, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.